Nancy Drew Mystery Stories, number 62, The Kachina Doll Mystery, by Carolyn Keene. Copyright 1981, Simon & Schuster. Chapter 1, A Friend's Plea. "Nancy, you have a letter from Arizona," Hannah Gruen called. "Do you know someone out there?" Nancy Drew, her Titian hair tousled by the early spring breeze, came into the kitchen through the back door. She smiled at the housekeeper, who had cared for her since her mother's death many years ago, then took the offered envelope. "Maybe it's an advertisement," Nancy said, studying the strange figure printed in the corner of the buff-colored envelope. However, it was a handwritten letter, not a pamphlet, that she took out of the envelope. "Why, it's from Heather McGuire," she murmured as she unfolded it to check the signature. "Remember her, Hannah?" "The pretty girl with the red hair and freckles?" Hannah asked. Nancy nodded. "She and her older brother moved away 2 years ago after their parents were killed in a plane crash. We planned to keep in touch, but I got involved in solving my mysteries, and I suppose she was so busy making new friends she didn't have time to write either." "Well, is she all right?" Hannah asked. Nancy scanned the letter, and a frown marred her usually smooth forehead. "I don't know," she admitted. "Let me read this to you." "I'll make some hot chocolate while you do," Hannah suggested. "It's rather nippy outside. You must be half frozen after your walk." Nancy smiled indulgently at the housekeeper. "That sounds wonderful." She began to read the letter. "Dear Nancy, I know you'll be surprised to hear from me after so long, but I don't know where else to turn. I remember how wonderful you have always been at solving mysteries, and now Chuck and I have one that we can't seem to do anything about." Nancy paused. "Chuck is her older brother," she explained. "The one Bess used to think was so handsome," Hannah agreed. Nancy laughed. "That's right. She was heartbroken when they told her they were going to Arizona to live with their grandfather. I'll have to call Bess and tell her about this letter." "Does Heather say what the mystery is?" Hannah asked. "That's the next part." Nancy went on reading. "A few years ago, Grandfather bought an old ranch near the Superstition Mountains east of Phoenix. We decided last year to make it into a fitness health resort, and we've been working on it ever since. We plan to open by next fall when the tourist season starts here. Now, however, I'm not sure we will ever open. The main attraction of the ranch is a wonderful old building that we have modernized for our hotel. Everyone calls it the Kachina house because the old man who built it painted a number of pictures of colorful Indian Kachina dolls on the walls of the central hall that are beautiful. We finally completed work on the inside of the building and moved in just after Christmas. That's when we learned about the Kachina's curse. Absolutely nothing has gone right since, Nancy, and even Chuck is beginning to believe that there is something haunting this house. If you can't help us, I'm afraid the Kachina Health Resort will never be more than a dream. We have plenty of room here, so if you and possibly George and Bess could come out for a spring vacation in the desert, you would be very welcome. Once you get here, maybe you will be able to find a way to end the curse." Nancy put down the letter with a sigh and accepted a cup of hot chocolate from Hannah. "She sounds desperate," Hannah observed, picking up the envelope. "Is this a Kachina?" she asked, indicating the drawing in the corner. Nancy nodded. "If I remember correctly, they are wooden statues carved by members of the southwestern Indian tribes. The dolls represent various Indian spirits. I've seen pictures of them. They are very beautiful and can be quite valuable, too." "This one doesn't look very friendly," Hannah commented, handing back the envelope. "What are you going to do?" "Do you think I could turn down such a plea?" Nancy asked, her blue eyes sparkling. "This sounds like a real problem, and Heather is an old friend." She finished her drink and got to her feet. "I think I'd better call Dad and find out if he will agree. Then I'll have to talk to George and Bess and see if they'd be interested in going." Hannah watched her go with a smile, sure that Mr. Drew would not object to the trip. It had been a long winter for all of them, and the prospect of a mystery to be solved was all the young sleuth ever needed to keep her happy. Nancy was still on the telephone talking to her father when the doorbell rang. Hannah went to admit George Fane and her cousin Bess Marvin, Nancy's best friends. She directed them to the study, sure that Nancy would wish to talk to them at once. "Just the two people I wanted to see," Nancy greeted them as soon as she put down the telephone receiver. "I have something to show you. A letter from Heather McGuire." She handed them the note, then waited patiently while the two girls read it. George, a slim brunette who had long ago learned to like her masculine first name, looked up first. "You are going, aren't you?" she asked. Nancy nodded. "I just talked to Dad and he gave me his permission. Now what about you two? Do you want to go?" "Do I?" George could hardly contain herself. "I'd love it. Imagine a vacation on an Arizona ranch." "What about the curse?" Bess asked, anxiety detracting from her pretty features. "What about Chuck?" George teased. "You used to think he was quite something. Isn't he worth facing the curse?" Bess giggled, showing her dimples. "Well, I guess as long as Nancy is going to be there, it'll be safe enough. And I do want to help." "Good," Nancy said. "Now why don't you call your families? Then we can make some real plans." "It's a shame the boys are all so busy at Emerson College," George commented. "They'd probably love to go to Arizona with us, Nancy." Nancy sighed. "And I'm sure we could use their help," she admitted, thinking of her handsome friend Ned. "But we'll just have to make it on our own, I'm afraid." Things moved quickly once George and Bess obtained permission from their families. Plane reservations were made for early Friday morning, leaving them just one day to pack the summer clothes they would need once they reached Arizona. Nancy called Heather that evening and, though their conversation was brief, her friend's gratitude was obvious. That proved to Nancy just how worried Heather was about the rumored curse and what it could mean to her future. Thursday, Nancy took a little time to go to the library and study the single book it had on Kachinas. The book was filled with photographs of the strange and beautiful wooden dolls, and did give her some information. The Kachinas had originated as part of the religion of the Hopi Indians and several other tribes. The dolls themselves represented the spirits of all the visible things in the Indian world. There were cloud Kachinas, various animal Kachinas, plant and bird Kachinas, and even Kachinas representing abstract ideas like death or the power of the sun. There wasn't time to read all the details that filled the book, but as she replaced it on the shelf, Nancy realized that none of what she'd read had even hinted at the Kachinas being involved in any curses. Could there be some other explanation for what was happening? She asked herself. Hannah was waiting for her when she returned to the house, and she looked concerned when she handed Nancy a letter. "This came while you were out," she explained. "It's from Arizona," Nancy observed, not recognizing the handwriting as she opened the envelope. The single sheet of paper she took out showed a crudely drawn Kachina lying on its back, an arrow protruding from it. Pasted-on letters cut from a newspaper made the message very clear. "Stay out of Arizona, Nancy Drew." Hannah gasped as she took the sheet from Nancy. "You can't go, Nancy," she murmured. Nancy took a deep breath. "But I must," she said. "Don't you see, Hannah? This just proves how desperately Heather and Chuck need my help. It's obvious that no ghost sent this." "But you could be putting yourself in danger," Hannah protested, "and your father should be told." Nancy looked at her watch. He's already on his way to Canada, she reminded Hannah. But Nancy, we don't want to worry him, and I'll be very, very careful, I promise, Nancy reassured her. Now why don't you help me with my packing? I'm never sure exactly what I should take. Hannah's gaze told her that she wasn't fully reassured, but she followed the young detective upstairs without further protests. Nancy's heartbeat quickened as she realized that she would soon be on her way to face whoever had sent the threatening letter. End of chapter 1.